Welcome to the next lecture in this Aerospace Medicine curriculum, Aviation Accident Prevention and Aeromedical Certification. My name is Sam King. I'm currently in the final year of an Aerospace Medicine residency at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and I am board certified in emergency medicine with a focused practice designation in advanced emergency medicine ultrasonography. This presentation uses material from the original mini-series curriculum and expands upon it in the 2024 update. Our residency and associated projects are funded in part by NASA. The content in these presentations serves as a basic introduction to aerospace medicine concepts for students. It is not a substitute for formal ACGME-accredited aerospace medicine training or aerospace medicine work experience and shall not be used as such in medical practice or decision-making. This material, including text, images, and multimedia, is protected by copyright and other intellectual property laws. The content is provided for informational purposes only. It may not be copied, reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, modified, or otherwise used in whole or in part without the express prior written permission of the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. Today, we will cover the following objectives as they relate to accident prevention. First, there are many organizations and academic institutions interested in aviation safety and accident prevention. Two organizations of which you should be aware are the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, and the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. This data highlights the extent of air travel and thus the importance of aviation safety. As reported by the FAA in 2023, there were 5,165 public use airports, over 9 million flights, and over 180,000 pilots with an air transport medical certificate. These are the pilots that work for Delta, United, Southwest, and more. In 2023, there were over 1 billion air passengers, which averages out to 2 million air passengers each day. This graph is from the same report from the FAA. In this graph, you can see the number of flights per minute on July 20th, 2023. You can see that at peak times, there were over 5,000 flights occurring simultaneously. All of these statistics highlight the extreme importance of aviation safety and accident prevention. This table is adapted from the Department of Transportation National Transportation Statistics Report from 2021, the 50th Anniversary Report. Highlighted in this table are the number of transportation fatalities by transportation mode. On this slide, you can see the total number of fatalities by year, and below them, the number of fatalities broken down by mode of transportation. You can see each year that the number of air-related fatalities is much less than that of highway fatalities. If we took all the various transportation modes and we represent the last table graphically, it looks like this. You can see that aviation accounted for less than 1% of all fatal accidents in 2020. Looking more closely at the data on air transportation-related fatalities, you can see that of the total of 349 fatalities, the vast majority were related to general aviation accidents. Think private pilots. There were no reported fatalities on major U.S. air carriers in the United States. So what is the actual risk of death on a U.S. commercial airline? Based on fatality data from the National Safety Council in 2019, it is approximately 1 in 200,000. However, that number is even smaller now as the number of major aviation accidents continues to decline. So small, in fact, the odds is not even able to be calculated for the most recent data year. But based on the 2019 data driving the equivalent distance of a U.S. airline flight, you are approximately 65 times more likely to be in a fatal accident driving than flying. Nonetheless, these numbers would not be what they are if it were not for the dedication to aviation safety and accident prevention. So, how do we prevent fatal accidents in aviation? First, we try to prevent accidents overall. Less accidents means less fatal accidents. Second, we try to protect occupants during accidents that do occur. Both the NTSB and FAA target aviation safety. As part of the agency's mission, the NTSB aggregates and updates aviation accident data for government, industry, and the public, publishes statistical reviews of aviation accident and injury data, and conducts research studies about transportation safety. The NTSB previously put out a most wanted list, which highlighted areas for target to decrease fatal accidents. This list was retired in 2023, but allowed for targeted effort and actions towards highly impactful issues. Efforts of the NTSB in aviation safety through this targeted action has led to safety improvements in multiple areas, including fatigued flying, weather airplane icing, and fuel tank safety. In addition, the FAA is an aviation safety organization which is responsible for the certification, production approval, and continued airworthiness of aircraft and certification of pilots, mechanics, and others in safety-related positions. The FAA organization has a multitude of divisions, which includes the Aerospace Medicine Division. The FAA bears the responsibility for pilot certification, both from a pilot's license as well as to medical certification, which we will discuss further later in this presentation. The FAA also hosts the Civil Aviation Medical Institute, located in Oklahoma City, where research on aviation safety and accidents occurs. There are many ways to approach protecting aircraft occupants. These slides will highlight a few worth knowing. An obvious strategy is seatbelts and harnesses. Commercial airlines have a lap belt. When you travel commercially and the safety video says, wear the seatbelt low and tight across your lap, this is very important. The lap belt should contact the iliac crests of your pelvis on either side. In the event of a crash, the momentum of your body will cause it to continue to move forward at the same velocity that the plane was flying until your seatbelt restrains you. If the seatbelt is worn properly, on the iliac crests, this force is distributed through this bony structure. Alternatively, if the seatbelt is worn too high across the abdomen, then organ damage may result. Cars have a shoulder belt in addition to the lap belt. This improves occupant safety in the event of an accident. Military and private aircraft typically have a 4 to 5 point harness restraint belt system, which provides the most optimal protection. They look very similar to the restraints seen in infant and child car seats. Crumple zones are exactly what they sound like. They are a portion of the aircraft, or as seen in this figure below a car, that is designed to crumple on impact. By crumpling, it increases the distance over which deceleration occurs. The longer the deceleration, the smaller the force on the occupant. Stroking mechanisms are typically used in helicopter seats. You can think of them like suspension in the seat base that lengthens the distance of deceleration, because helicopters crash vertically, between the seat and the floor of the helicopter. Again, lengthening the distance of deceleration is protective to the occupant. Egress is a term used in aviation to mean getting out of the aircraft. Egress equipment includes anything that helps with this: ejection seats, parachutes, inflatables, slides and rafts, emergency exit doors, life jackets, and more. The engineered materials arresting system stops the plane at the end of a runway. This is very similar to a runaway truck ramp used in the mountains for trucks that have lost their brakes on downhill stretches or roads. Crash testing of vehicles can look at the safety impact of many of the above mechanisms on passenger safety and allow for prediction of mechanisms of injury that can again reduce the impact of an accident. These slides have only listed a portion of the tools that have been developed and implemented to protect occupants in the event of an accident. This video shows a collaboration between the FAA and NASA's Langley facility. This is a drop test of a section of fuselage from an aircraft with occupants and luggage. Tests like these are done to make changes to restraints and structures in the aircraft to improve safety of the occupants. The video shows the same drop from multiple angles so you can appreciate the damage that can be done. Keep in mind this is a stationary drop from 14 feet. You can imagine the amount of engineering behind occupant safety, extrapolating this to the circumstances of a real crash.
You want me to take one of you, Greg? pretty good. Like the whole seat rail. Well, more of the leg. So.
The FAA does multidisciplinary research to improve occupant safety. Let's look at a video that highlights some of the many different areas that improve occupant safety in aviation.
It's where everything comes together. The de-icing programs, the fueling programs, the ground handling programs, the maintenance of the, turning the aircraft, the pilots operating the aircraft, the flight attendants. Everything comes to a point at the aircraft.
Many people talk about aircraft safety. We don't speak of the aircraft safety, we speak of the human safety. And that human is not only the pilot, it's our families.
I'm an operations research analyst. I do safety analysis for the FAA. Growing up, always wanting to be a pilot, I still have that sense of wonderment when I look up. You're not just a regulator sitting behind a desk, that you're also a pilot who is out there flying, who wants to operate safely. I really think that's an important aspect of what we do.
I am the Human Factors Research Division Manager. We look at different technologies that go into the cockpit. What the division is responsible for is performing research that's aimed at enhancing human performance within the aviation spectrum.
I'm an aviation safety inspector.
We will develop a test that will take place in the simulator here.
We're able to collect data, enhancing efficiency, reducing the carbon footprint, and reducing noise, put more airplanes together into the same airspace more efficiently.
This is a really cool time in aviation. We're on this cutting edge in terms of the advent of unmanned aircraft technology. In AVS, we're not just sort of in charge of incorporating or integrating this into the National Airspace System, but we're also on that cutting edge of integrating a new technology into society.
I'm the team coordinator for the cabin safety research team. We are concerned with everything inside the cabin that relates to passenger safety. We're currently in the Flexible Aircraft Cabin Simulator, also known as the Flex Sim. It is what we use for evacuation research.
I came from NASA. I worked at the White Sands Test Facility as an aerospace engineer there as well. Each engineer, we're all part of the big team effort and a project effort to get that component or engine or aircraft certified.
The first thing when somebody has a new idea, flying cars, electric engines, the first place they will often come is to aircraft certification. The innovation is incredible to listen to ways people have thought of bringing new safety into the aviation industry.
What I do every day is manage the diversity and inclusion program for AVS. A big role is making sure that we get the best talent across this country to come and work in FAA and AVS.
I'm the manager over the forensic toxicology research team and the biochemistry research team.
So we videotape everything that comes in and we process them. We take a portion of it to provide for the toxicology analyses.
Both teams do research attempting to come up with prevention strategies for future accidents.
I'm a management and program analyst for the Civil Aviation Registry. There are currently about 307,000 aircraft registered on Part 47. On the airman side, currently there's about 1.4 million active airman records. It's a process of a lot of different people to feed it all into one system to get it all done to make sure that everybody gets the accurate information that they need.
I'm an air traffic control safety specialist. We are responsible for setting and approving safety standards. We monitor compliance against those standards, and we also oversee the air traffic organization's safety management system.
I'm the General Aviation and Commercial Division Small UAS team lead for policy and implementation. Every decision that we make, it's about the public.
I love the fact that what we do, there are tangible results every single day. When there's not a commercial aviation accident, we know that's the result of the regulations that we have in place.
What gets me to get up and come to work every day is the research we do here.
I'm able to help the airline move to a safer and more compliant stance.
It's very rewarding to see some of the work that we've done be implemented in the national airspace system.
Makes you want to come into work and help determine what we can do to improve aviation safety.
When I look up at the sky and I see an airplane, I feel a sense of pride.
There's a sense of a personal responsibility. You take this as an important thing as what you do.
Every day I go to work and I know that we are saving lives. We're making it safer for the flying public, and we're making it overall a better industry.
The compendium of personnel involves chemists, physiologists, toxicologists, geneticists, engineers. Somehow they merge their knowledge to arrive at better ways to protect the most important aspect of the national airspace system, and that's the human.
I
am aviation safety.
Now that we have had a brief introduction to accident prevention, we are going to switch gears and discuss aeromedical certification. We will cover the following objectives today as they relate to aeromedical certification. An AME is an aviation medical examiner. This is a physician that is delegated authority by the FAA to examine applicants and determine whether or not they meet medical standards to fly an aircraft in the USA. When a pilot comes for a physical, the AME has three options. They can issue the medical certificate, they can defer the decision to the FAA for review, or they can deny the certificate. Becoming an AME requires special training in addition to a physician's primary specialty training. This training is from the Federal Aviation Administration in Oklahoma City, but any physician can undergo this training. AMEs are designated by a region, and to become an AME, you must be approved by the FAA to take the training needed to be designated. The link provided on this slide can be used to find an AME in your area. So how does this process work? The pilot first fills out an application regarding their medical history called MedExpress. MedExpress is an electronic submission of the form, known as the Form 8500-8, which enables the pilot to fill out their medical details and have it electronically available for the AME to review. Then, within 30 days, the pilot goes to see the AME physician for their physical. The physician reviews the pilot's medical history and medications and performs a thorough physical examination. It should be noted that this exam has very specific criteria for vision, hearing, cardiovascular screening that are different than a typical well visit for a non-aviator. This is why the pilot must see a trained and designated AME. After the examination, the AME has 14 days to submit their decision, issue, defer, or deny to the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA will then review the decision and has 60 days to notify the pilot if they disagree with the AME's decision. If this is the case, the FAA will then inform the pilot of the next steps in the process to medical certification. So what are the medical certificates? There are three classes of medical certificate: first, second, and third class. First class certificates are required for airline transport pilots. These are the pilots that fly airlines like United, Delta, or Southwest. These certificates can only be issued by a senior AME, which are AMEs that have a certain amount of experience as an AME prior to receiving this designation. Second class certificates are required for commercial pilots, meaning anyone that collects money to fly passengers on planes other than airlines, which were Class 1 is above. Think private jet. This also includes flight engineers, flight navigators, and private air traffic control tower operators. FAA air traffic controllers, ATC specialists, have a separate process. Third class certificates are required for private and recreational pilots. It makes sense based on the demands of these different job descriptions that first-class physicals are the most rigorous and third-class the least rigorous. Where things get complicated is that different certificates are valid for different lengths of time, and this varies with age. Let's break it down. For a pilot under the age of 40, a first-class physical is valid for 12 months. A second-class physical is valid for the same 12 months. And a third-class physical is valid for 60 months, which is 5 years. For a pilot 40 or older, a first-class physical is valid for 6 months, a second-class physical is valid for 12 months, and a third-class physical is valid for 24 months. But it is more complicated than one certificate is equal to one length of time. Once a pilot's medical certificate has expired, if there is a lower class, the pilot is still eligible to fly under that lower class certificate until that time expires. Let's look at how on the next slide. Let's pretend we have a pilot over 40 years old who has been issued a first-class physical. They can fly using that certificate for 6 months. Since it is a first-class physical, they are medically cleared for air transport duties. So, they could fly for an airline for 6 months using this certificate. During the same 6 months, they can also exercise the privileges allowed on a second or third-class physical. After 6 months, they can no longer exercise first-class privileges, but they can exercise second-class privileges or third-class. After an additional 6 months, a total of 12 months, if they do not recertify, they can no longer exercise first or second-class privileges, but they can still exercise third-class. In other words, their first-class physical has degraded to a third class at this time, but remains a third-class physical for an additional 12 months. We discussed that AMEs require special training and that pilot physicals are unique and have different requirements than an ordinary physical exam. The details of these requirements can be found in the FAA's Guide for Aviation Medical Examiners. In addition to the examination and pilot physical requirements, the guide also has instructions on how to deal with certain medical conditions and required evaluation should a pilot have an underlying medical problem such as high blood pressure or asthma. A link to this guide is provided on this slide. Note that this guide is also updated monthly, so accessing it in real time online will provide the most up-to-date information. So why would a pilot be disqualified from medical certification to fly? Anything that compromises the safety of a pilot, passengers, and/or the U.S. airspace could disqualify a pilot from medical clearance. These are called generally disqualifying conditions. They will be reviewed by the FAA, and if there is a path to medical certification with appropriate treatment or increased surveillance, the FAA will inform the pilot of the next steps. For some of these conditions, instructions and procedures are listed in the AME guide and can be completed in conjunction with an AME at time of evaluation, allowing for certification. In addition to generally disqualifying conditions, there is a list of 15 specifically disqualifying conditions that are specifically listed in the Code of Federal Regulations. These conditions are always disqualifying. But again, if there is a path to certification after treatment or with increased surveillance, the FAA will notify the pilot. This is the list of 15 specifically disqualifying conditions. A senior AME, that is an AME with extra training and experience, can help navigate the process toward regaining a medical certificate, if this is possible, through a special issuance from the FAA. To remember these conditions, it is easiest to categorize them by system. There are 6 cardiac specifically disqualifying conditions. There is 1 endocrine specifically disqualifying condition. Of note, the FAA has recently opened up the opportunity for first and second class pilots with diabetes requiring insulin to receive a medical certification, but it requires stringent monitoring. There are 5 psychiatric specifically disqualifying conditions. And there are 3 neurologic specifically disqualifying conditions. Looking at this list, you can see that these are all conditions that could put the pilot at risk for sudden incapacitation, disabling them from being able to fly and putting themselves, their passengers, and the U.S. airspace at risk. Remember, the previous list are the 15 specific specifically disqualifying conditions that are listed in the Code of Federal Regulations, but any condition which may compromise aviation safety may be disqualifying. It is important that the AME evaluate for any condition that a pilot may have that could lead to subtle or sudden incapacitation. These other conditions which are not specifically named are considered generally disqualifying. Remember, this does not mean that a pilot cannot obtain a medical certification, but rather that they need further evaluation. Remember, the AME guide has procedures in place to expedite the evaluation and certification of pilots with common chronic medical conditions. The ability to look for and guide pilots with an underlying medical condition is why it is so important that AMEs receive the specialized training that they do. And now, time for a knowledge check. What was the approximate risk to the general U.S. population per year of dying in a U.S. commercial airline accident in 2019? In 2019, data regarding the risk of death from a U.S. commercial airline accident approximated the risk at 1 in 200,000, which is significantly less than that of an automobile accident. The rates of death are so low that today the same group is unable to calculate the risk because it is so low. An airline pilot, think Delta, Southwest, needs what class of Federal Aviation Administration medical certificate? Airline pilots who fly for companies like Delta or Southwest, also known as air transport pilots, require a first-class medical certificate. Which of the following are specifically disqualifying conditions for pilots according to the Code of Federal Regulations? Remember, while these many conditions may be considered generally disqualifying, there are 15 conditions listed in the Code of Federal Regulations that are specifically listed. Of this list, permanent pacemaker, history of psychosis, and heart transplant are specifically disqualifying. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you have learned something from this presentation. In review, flying is one of the safest modes of transportation. Aviation safety relies on accident prevention and occupant protection in accidents that do happen. However, prevention of accidents through pilot and aircraft safety measures is key. Pilots receive medical certification through a process involving aeromedical examiners. Aeromedical examiners, AMEs, are physicians who receive specialized training and are the FAA designees who perform pilot examinations and certification. This concludes this lecture. These are my references. We would like to give a special thanks to Amy Krakis, current Associate Program Director and UTMB RAM graduate class of 2020, who created the original version of the UTMB Aerospace Medicine Seminar Series. And a special thanks to Ms. Heather Medley for her tireless work in reformatting and updating the seminar series as a part of the 2024 revisions. Thank you for watching this presentation. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at the email listed here.